very little, not too often, good quality food, and we don't need a lot. 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, 3 at most. Just 100 years ago, they only ate 2 main meals a day. But customs and culture today says 10 times a day, 15 times a day. You say, not me, I say yes to you, because there's no little man in the stomach with a little computer saying, here comes a meal or here comes a snack. Anytime you eat something, the body has to work to process that. So your little snacks and your grazing throughout the day, that's putting more food on top of more food, never giving the body a chance to digest. And then in the late 80s, it just came out and said, well, we should eat many small meals throughout the day. That's crazy. First of all, anyone who thinks that, they're not eating small meals. They're eating many big meals throughout the day. But it's still insane to think that. I say, why would you do something like that? They say, well, that speeds up our metabolism. Don't you understand? When you speed up your metabolism, you speed up your aging, the key is to slow it down. People go, well, if I don't do that, then I'm going to put on weight if I don't keep my metabolism up high. I go, well, maybe if you weren't eating so often, you wouldn't have to worry about putting on weight. 2 meals a day or 3 the most, that's all we need. And if you're eating a good quality food, you're going to get what you need from that food. But the customs today say something different. You know, you look at how it was done 100 years ago, it was completely different. Because I tell people, if you want to be successful at eating a daytime diet, you have to be successful at sleeping according to the schedule we were designed to sleep. Now I know it's not practical to get to sleep when the sun goes down, especially in the winter time, but at least get to sleep before midnight, the hours before midnight, the majority of the time. That's what's going to help your body get the rest and the healing it needs. I'm going to tell you something now about health that nobody's told you before, and this is going to help you understand a lot. Food does not heal our bodies. What food does is it puts our bodies in a position to get the proper amount of rest and sleep that it needs. And the body heals itself during that rest and sleep. That's when cleansing is taking place. During the rest and sleep, when we get the right quantity and quality of sleep that we require. And if we're eating a diet too much, too often, or too late, we're not letting the body have that opportunity to do the healing that it was meant to do. And that's the situation we find most people in today. Eating too much, too often, and too late, and then they make their excuses. Because I have found we have habits and addictions in life, and people think that they're same, but they're not. A habit is when we do something on a regular basis that we enjoy, when we find out it's bad for us, we break that habit. And addiction is when we do something on a regular basis that we enjoy, when we find out it's bad for us, we make excuses to keep doing it. We need to change our addictions to habits and break them. Everyone say break them.
Break them.
Now say it with enthusiasm.
Break them.
Very good. That's what we have to do. So I'm going to go over some of the excuses, and I bring them up in my book that people say, well, they can't eat at night and all this stuff, but we're going to see some of these things, and we're going to see that we can overcome these things, and that they are just excuses. You know, understand, everything in nature has a design, even right down to the food we eat. Food is supposed to have a life process to it. That's what real food is. It has a ripening stage, a freshness stage, and a rotting stage. That's what real food is, and that's what fruits and vegetables have. Then you look at something on the other end of that, something like a Tim Tam, or whatever you call them here. A Tam Tam, what do you call them? I got it right, wow. There's no life process to that at all. You have that same thing in the package, it just sits there and nothing happens to it. Just like in your body, it sits there and nothing happens to it. It just makes problems. You know, everything the food is good for, it even tells us what it's good for. Take, for example, a carrot. Does anyone know what a carrot is good for? How do you know that? Because if you cut a carrot, you have 2 eyes looking at you. It looks like an eye. What about celery? You know the minerals in celery are good for the bones? What is the shape of celery? The shape of the bones. You know, avocados. You know, avocados are wonderful for pregnant women. It looks like the womb. You see, everything the food is good for, it tells us. How about this one? Think about this one, a walnut. What do you think a walnut is good for?
Brain.
The brain. Exactly. Now what about this one, a Tim Tam? What do you think that's good for? We don't want to be putting that in our body, but you know, it doesn't look like anything we want from our body, but that's what people do. Chemicals. So we have to be careful. We have to realize this. It's very simple. It's not getting too complicated and making it too complicated like people do. And you can't go to a doctor. You go to a doctor, I mean, you're overweight, you're obese, and you go to a doctor and you tell him something's wrong, I'm having trouble sleeping, I don't feel good, I have a lack of energy, I have indigestion. First of all, it's bad enough that you go to a doctor, same problem, right? You don't think about that one, but you go to the doctor, and we have to understand something. If you have obesity and lung cancer does not run in families. Overeating and smoking run in families. So we have to understand that. But you go to a doctor, and a doctor will say, well, everyone's coming to my office with this issue, so I guess, let me give them a reason to keep doing this. So they'll name some kind of disorder after it and make people feel comfortable saying, well, it's not under my control. The doctor says something's wrong with me. I have this disorder that everyone's suffering from, so I don't have any control over it. So people keep eating late at night to make it even worse. The doctor will give them some drugs to take and say, make sure you take food with these drugs late at night to make the problem even worse. You got so many people eating so late at night now. There's something out there now called late night eating disorder. That's when people eat the majority of their food late at night. Remember, it's not going to do the same thing in the body when you eat late at night. It's gotten so bad, there's even something called sleep eating disorder. That's when people will actually, this is a serious thing, they'll actually go to sleep, and without knowing it, they'll get up in the middle of the night, they won't wake up, they'll get up, they'll go over to the refrigerator and they'll eat, and without even knowing they were awake, they'll go back to bed, and they won't even know they were awake. There's only one thing I can think of that's more dangerous than getting up in the middle of the night and eating and not knowing it. You know what that is? That's getting up in the middle of the night and eating and knowing it. And this is what people continue to do on a regular basis and make all their excuses and everything else. People will say, well, I tell people, it's very simple. We need to eat less. We need to eat less. I tell people, if you're eating higher quality food, you don't need to eat as much. If you're eating low quality food, yes, there might be emotional and spiritual reasons why you desire so much food, but from a diet standpoint, the quality of the food is probably not as good as it should be. And even though you're eating, you're not getting what your body needs, nutrition-wise. People say, well, I know what you're saying, Paul, I just can't afford to eat healthy. I say, well, if you're eating healthier food, you're eating less. If you're eating less, you're spending less money on food. People go, well, I know what you're saying, but I don't have enough time to eat healthy. I go, well, if you're eating healthy, you're eating less. If you're eating less, you're spending less time in the kitchen. People say, well, I know what you're saying, I just like to eat. I say, well, if you're eating less, you live long and you'll get to eat more. And all the excuses will come in of not eating at night time. People go, well, after work, my family likes to come home around the meal and just watch TV or just eat late at night and discuss the day's events. I said, you can have a much better discussion sitting around that table and not eating, and eating earlier in the daytime. Maybe have a late lunch at work or in school and then come home and not eat. Eat a bigger breakfast and have that meal time around morning time or something. People say, well, I know what you're saying, but I like to go out, I'm social, and I can't do that, not eating at night stuff. You'll meet very few people in this world that are as social as I am. I go out all the time with people that eat late. I'm the only one that sits here at the table and I don't eat. I'm like the designated non-eater. And I'm the only one that feels good after the meal. I have a cup of tea or a cup of water and just have my conversation without food flying all over the place and everything else. Understand, you don't have to fall in these traps of culture and society today that just make us, sicker and sicker and sicker. But that's what's happening today. We need to understand there are ideal times to eat our food, assuming we get up at the ideal time. And we can take a great example, the way it was done just 100 years ago. You see, 100 years ago, you had people getting up at the right time when the sun rose. That's the ideal time to be awake. The most special time each day, and you just feel it when you're up when the sun rises, especially if you got to sleep the night before. But you need to get a good night's worth of sleep, get up when the sun gets up, and that's it. Now, there's 3 stages to the daylight diet, because I know some of you are thinking, what if we live in Alaska? Well, you don't live there, so stop thinking that. There's 3 stages to the daylight diet, but the first thing we have to understand is get up when the sun rises. Some people might say, well, I'm not a morning person. I say, if I'm telling you to only eat when it's daylight outside, you think of it, the earlier you get up, the more you get to eat. If that's not a great reason to get up early, I'm patient. But you get up when the sun gets up. This is what they did 100 years ago. Then they didn't eat. Today, the average person will eat breakfast running out of their house with a donut in their mouth because they're late for work getting somewhere. Back then, people got up and they didn't eat for the first few hours. They did their work, their exercise, whatever they had to do. And then, about the 3rd hour, that's when they ate their first meal, which they call breakfast. And then, around noontime or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they ate the biggest meal of the day. And you know what they called it? They called it dinner. They called it dinner. And then right before the sun went down, some people ate a very light meal called supper. I used to think dinner and supper meant the same thing, but it doesn't. Dinner was a heavy meal right in the middle of the day, was meant to dine, where supper was something like soup or something served at the end of the day, because back then, people didn't like to go to sleep on a heavy stomach. Today, it's like almost opposite. People say they can't go to sleep unless they're on a heavy stomach. So we have to look at the way they did it back back then, they only had two main meals. You had your breakfast and your dinner, and some people had supper. Today it's different. Today you got your brunch, lunch, dinner, afternoon snack, midnight snack, my Team Lost snack, and my Oprah Winfrey snack, and all these other things. All these excuses just to eat away and eat away. We gotta get self-control. See, I don't believe, a lot of people would say, well, everything's good in moderation. I do not